So I think for employers, I would say be open to innovating and be open to making long strategic investments, because this type of work, you can't use a Band-Aid to stop it.
Thank you for joining us for this candid conversation on women in leadership. Why do we keep having to say women in leadership? Please welcome McGirt, Lissette Nieves, and Ahva Sadeghi.
Well, I just love me a live audience. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for including us in this important conversation here at Horizon Summit 2023. This is a really special treat. We've got a big question that we're going to tackle today. Why do we have to keep saying women in leadership? And why do we have to, and where are women of color in this conversation? We're going to tackle all of this today. I'm Ellen McGirt, and for a split second, I thought I was going to be the rainbow filling in a power sandwich here. So thank you for giving me a chair over here so I can take a look at everybody and we can talk through this. Lissette, if with your kind permission, I'm going to hit some beats from your amazing career and have you start us off, if that's okay?
Sounds great.
You're currently president of the fund for the city of New York, which is amazing, but you've also been a professor focusing on business, leadership, and innovation. You've been an entrepreneur and company founder, an Obama appointee focusing on the White House initiative on educational excellence for Hispanics, and the founding director of Year Up, a now beloved workforce development organization. So thank you for all of this, and you've touched a lot of lives across a lot of sectors. I'm curious, looking back, before we look ahead, was there a through line for your efforts, for your focus, for your philosophy, or was there a foundational moment when you said, yes, this is my best use in life and this is where I can push ahead?
Absolutely, there was a through line. And I would say it was probably when I was around 10 years old. And I can pinpoint it because it was actually the time when my parents were part of a group of families that organized a rent strike.
Oh.
And I say that because here you are, a working class family, Puerto Rican family in Brooklyn, in a building with plenty of tenants who are not getting repairs done. And they decided to organize. And so when you would come home from school, you would see all these families. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But when I really understood what it meant to take risks and to care deeply was how hard people work to break a rent strike. They would try to pay off my father. They would say, if you pull out, we could, you could be fine. We could have moved. And he refused. And I just always remember that risk is not calculated in those who have a lot. Risk includes a much broader sense of what you consider value. And so for me, I was like, if they could put it on the line for that, why the hell can't I do what the hell I want to do and put it on the line? So
that's a great story. That's a great story. Ahva, you also have a great story. It's one of the great founding stories for an entrepreneur that I've been able that I've heard of in a long time, and I'm positioned to know I've been covering this for a long time. Here's how I describe what you do. Tell me if I'm on track here. You're the co-founder and CEO of Symba, which is a software company that helps companies manage workforce development, particularly internships and apprenticeship programs. But it's really an inclusion and economic justice engine hiding in plain sight. How did I do?
You did great. You get it. That's exactly what we do.
How did it come to be?
We began building Symba as a social impact project through a project I worked on with late Congressman John Lewis. So I was very, very fortunate to be in his office as a fellow. And my whole vision was being in the quest for good trouble. And I feel like that aligns with your 10-year-old self, seeing your parents really doing that good work and fight. And it's such an honor to be on this couch with you. I admire you so much.
So I want to dig into the numbers, because the numbers for women are grim in many cases, promising in other cases. I'm not really sure that we understand exactly what's happening for women, particularly post-pandemic. But I do have some sort of golf clap-worthy breaking news from the Fortune 500 list. This year, after 69 years, we have a record number of women CEOs. Out of the 500, there's 52. Right. That's exactly right. It should be so much more. Let's dig into why and what's happening to women as they move up the talent pipeline. Where are we losing them, and what can we do about it? Lissette, do you have any insights there?
I do have insights in there. And I think some of it is, I wish we could also put the number up of how many women have been the top talent that's required by the current male CEOs, right? And I say that because so often that is a work relationship where women's talent are hidden. And when you talk to particularly the women that you're talking about, many of them were in that role before.
Right.
Right? And so the question becomes, who is in that tier and how do we recognize them? So that's one. I think the other piece is that, which I love about you and what's so inspiring, is this incredible energy and entrepreneurship that women have. Largest percentage, particularly Latina women going into business, social entrepreneurs, no surprise, your company did so well. I mean, this is for women of color, this has been an area where they've been able to have their kind of energy and advocacy and then have opted out of some of these other ways. So I have seen women who've left corporate sector and say, I'm going to build a wealth fund, I'm going to separate myself or build my own business. Because they do not trust that they would be the ones who'd be selected next. So I would say that's part of a story. That's not the whole story. I'm fascinated to hear it from another generational perspective of how you might look at that too.
Absolutely. And I feel like that resonates to me for a whole host of reasons because we've raised venture capital and less than 2% of venture capital goes to women, and even less than that to women of color. And so in so many ways, when they decide, okay, who actually gets capital, it's often people who look like you. They believe in you. And that's one of the challenges we're facing. How do we have more sponsors of women who are able to lift each other up, understand what talents they need, and advocate when they're not in the room? I think for the younger generation, we're a lot more hopeful. We're a lot more bold. We're loud. We're talking about these issues. We're unapologetic, which is awesome, but there's still so much work to be done because, even though we've made some growth to breaking that 10% of women in Fortune 500, it still takes so much longer for a woman to become CEO than a man. So it's not only just the number, it's the time.
Right. You mentioned women and people of color. Ursula Burns, my last conversation with her, actually started pounding the table, and it was a podcast. We had to start over again. She said she was tired of taking calls from desperate white CEOs looking for a black candidate for a board. And they said, what are you looking for? I said, I need someone who's run a major company before. And she's like, okay, that's like 14 people. That's literally, there's 14 of us.
You've shortened the list,
yeah,
right?
Right? I mean, we're already on all the boards already. So what is it? So there's a whole new conversation about who's qualified. Can we talk about where we can identify real leadership and management potential in ways that are unusual for corporate America? It means I don't look exactly like the person who had the job before me. And you mentioned being, young and bold and apologetic, but you had an unusually good experience raising capital at a very early stage in your career. What should we be telling people who do not have that kind of, that have not had that kind of breakthrough experience, which you have earned and deserve? For sure.
But I wouldn't say it was unusually good. We were in Techstars, and right around the time we were fundraising, we probably had to do 50x more meetings than our male counterparts. We were just relentless, persistent, and it was interesting. Even at the time, they said, don't tell people what you do. Actually, just put your growth slide first, and then tell them afterwards what you do. And we were like, what? They're like, yeah, your metrics are so great, and then they'll listen to you once they see that. And we're like, we can't imagine anybody else get that feedback, put your metrics, and then talk about what your business does. So it was a very fascinating experience, but my goal would say, go into those meetings extra prepared. Leave absolutely nothing on the table that they could dig into. Be prepared and go in. If it takes 50x, do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So what do women need to succeed? I recently wrapped up a podcast series on childcare. Where's the childcare? Where's my village? Where's the childcare? And I feel like that's just one element of what's missing in the entire ecosystem for professional women, because women are part of families typically, and they're taking care of older relatives typically, and they're community members, and they're thinking about the well-being of people around them. That's sort of a typical profile of a woman walking through the world. What should we be advocating for? Lissette, I feel like this is a perfect question for you.
You're living my life story.
Yes, wish list.
So I think there is this thing where we are responsible for the care economy, and whenever you put women responsible for an economy, it becomes a pink industry, and then it's paid lower, right? Or not paid. And I'm really frustrated by that. So I'm in between childcare and elder care. And
Yeah.
many of us do that.
Me too.
Who have waited for careers, who've gone to school for additional. And then I layer the cultural expectations as a Latina. That's another appointment. I'll
Yep.
have to talk through that. But,
Yeah.
but what I think is interesting, what do we need? We need to call it a care economy that helps both men and women. It helps families, right? Instead of child care, it should be family care. How do we think of that? So for example, at the fund, one of the first things we did that we're so proud to do is that we actually have backup elder care support.
Really?
And we rolled that out for the equivalent of 500 employees. And let me tell you, that was just as exciting as when we did childcare.
Wow.
Right? And so when we said that, all of a sudden people are like, wow, this is an incredible benefit. We didn't realize that when a caregiver, because we think about childcare when someone's out, but when you're dealing with elder care, that's an issue as well too.
Yep.
Right? And so, and we don't have the infrastructure to allow people to age with dignity who have any health challenges. I'm sorry, we just do not.
No, that's right.
Especially for the working class and poor.
Yep.
Right? And so I do think it's a moral imperative that we have to have. I think the question of what we consider a return on investment is important for us. So I would say, how do we think about a family care plan, broader? How do we make sure that's affordable on a policy level for nonprofits, where we know 1 in 6 employers in New York City are nonprofits, of which more than half are women, predominantly women of color. So what does that mean when we say, for an industry where we're disproportionately represented, that we're going to expect family care, we're going to expect retirement benefits? We're radically changing kind of the moral compass of what we believe women contribute, particularly women of color. So that's what I'd love to see.
Okay. All right. Same wish list question, given what you do and the kinds of data you collect and the kinds of stories that you're collecting as you think about the ways forward, apprenticeships and internships. Magic wand, how can major employers be more welcoming?
So I also would say kudos to everything you just did as far as elderly care and investment. I feel like the talk before could even merge with this, talking about building an economic model that really incentivizes this type of work. And I think that's the same thing I would wish for in this exact model of internship apprenticeships, because it's a investment, but unfortunately for us, it's a really long-term ROI, and it doesn't give us this instant gratification of like, great, we're seeing the results immediately. Sometimes it takes 3, 5, 10, 20 years to see the impacts of workforce development. So I think for employers, I would say be open to innovating and be open to making long strategic investments, because this type of work, you can't use a Band-Aid to stop it. You have to really, really invest and really, rethink from ground up.
Yes.
So back to the wish list. Yes. Applause. That's perfect. It's on my list always to talk about allies and alliances, and it's typically the male allies that we want to talk about. But I think we should start with women. I think we should start with white women who have been the beneficiary of affirmative action since it was sort of formalized in the way that we know since in the 1960s, which is about to go away. So we're all part of my job is to worry about what's going to happen after the SCOTUS decision that comes. So what have you learned, Lissette, I'll start with you, about what makes a good ally in the workplace, particularly for women of color, and where can white women can step up and play a more robust role in making sure that they're looking to people who don't look exactly like them?
Okay.
It says candid, so we're going to get candid.
Well, we're gonna get candid without the martinis. But what I would say first is, for anyone who hasn't read, they should read what Ellen's written about this, because I think it's extraordinary, and they are candid articles and writings about this. So I'd say one of the first things when we think about it is for white women particularly to understand how their access to white men has disproportionately put them in rooms of power. And I think that's important to say. Like, you just kind of have to accept that premise, that part of your social network has been by default, because we're a highly racialized and segregated country.
Yep.
And that's not a mea culpa, that's not I have to go beat myself up. This is not acting out of guilt. This is about acting out of responsibility. And I say allies act out of responsibility and not guilt. And so what does that mean, responsibility? Responsibility means saying, particularly when you have women of color, is understanding that there are going to be moments where the connection may seem very clear and easy through a gender lens, but there are going to be moments where it's absolutely not clear because there are other intersectional pieces that we are managing and dealing that you may not understand. And that is okay, this idea of discomfort with that. I think the other piece is important, the role that particularly white women have had in managing money for white families and wealth. And I would say another piece is, particularly when we think about philanthropy, I'd really want to see more white women who disproportionately lead philanthropy really think about, and are doing it, which I'm really proud of, and there's a way of being an ally, is to do it through a mindset of investment versus a mindset of charity. And that's an important piece, because I think so often when we talk about women, gender, people of color, it's easy to get in discussions about where we don't have power, but where do we manifest our power? And being really intentional about that and saying, how have I layered these particular systemic views, even unintentionally in that? So I think being an ally is that kind of self-reflection. And I think with that, the key is out of responsibility and not guilt.
It's interesting. Ahva, you were nodding along there, and I'm curious from your perspective and from your experience, how you seeing younger women of all hues walking into the workplace. What are their expectations, and what are the things that they're gearing themselves up for?
Absolutely. And I was nodding along because I couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate the reframing from guilt to responsibility to taking action to really empowering people to be allies and feel like they can take a seat at the table. I think sometimes that's missing. And that's why it's difficult to feel like an ally, because you don't know how to be a part of it. But if we empower people, then it's approachable. They can feel involved. And I think for young women, given what's happened with COVID, it's been particularly challenging because the spontaneous, like, can we grab coffee and walk and go on a walk with a mentor who might be more senior, is so challenging. To get on Zoom and ask for mentorship and guidance and support and to find a new advocate takes a lot more work. It's not easy to find that spark as quickly I've found.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really for leaders to carve out time and be intentional, because I'm concerned about this gap of opportunity and mentorship that we're going to experience with this next generation.
I totally agree with that. I think this idea of proximity and what that means, I can't tell you, particularly for young women of color who were either in my classroom or worked with me, who will come up because they're right there with you, who will say, I really need to talk to you because I think you can understand this, which doesn't translate in a LinkedIn message or doesn't translate in an email. And you're right, I could see that.
And it also sounds that you're both saying that everybody is in a position to share power, to share knowledge. And, great inclusive leadership happens every day in the conversations you have with real people. And I know that we're talking about AI and technology and all of these amazing platforms that are coming along, but I don't think anything's going to substitute for the human touch here. So in the few minutes that we have remaining, just what are some things, some thinking points and some talking points that you can share with anybody who's just one or two chapters ahead of the amazing women who are walking into the workforce right now? How can you be better mentors and sponsors? How can we share power?
One is, I think it's important to keep an intersectional lens on it, so gender and race together, and thinking about apprenticeships and tracks for movement forward. We do see disproportionately and higher paying apprenticeships that we're not including that. Including as many women. I think that's important to be mindful of. I think the second thing is, when we say apprenticeship, we think of an alternate structure for benefits. If we really are interested and we want to support families first, we should make sure that they have the full benefits even in the apprenticeship cycle.
Nice.
To be able to benefit. Then we are being inclusive.
Yep.
Right? We know the decision, the power you make to say someone could have benefits day one versus after 3 months.
Yeah.
Which do you choose? Where are your values? So I think that those are pieces that when we're talking about creating employment opportunities, we need to recognize that these are all tiny decisions that can either let you live true values of being inclusive or by default be exclusive.
Ahva, last word. What do we need to think about when we go out into the world and begin to notice the people around them, and what do they need to succeed, particularly women?
We think about it at Symba as this form of symbiotic relationships, right? What is the value and the time that you're actually allocating to this investment? And how are you measuring success so that you're constantly aligning resources and everything you need behind it? So look at your calendar and see, how much time a week do I actually spend time being a mentor? How often have I advocated for someone who needs support, and advocating and asking these questions constantly? I think that makes you a better leader, and that helps you build a culture, including all the facts of like making sure you have the benefits and everything aligned up in the right place. So it's a holistic approach.
Let's make sure that we all stand up and organize the next version of the rent strike that we need to make sure that the workplace is equitable for all women all the time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful experience. Thank you, JFF.